question comes from Dan Murphy from Westchester Rising. You already spoke to this a bit, but we'll still ask his question here. He asks, there has been a lot of discussion about Governor Hochul's housing plan. Do you have any opinion or comment?
Well, I think what I said a second ago summarizes some of it, but let me pull it together in one cohesive way so that people understand what we're dealing with. Issues have a life of their own, and certainly we're not unmindful of the fact that politics and policy walk side by side in these things. There's a political argument that exists, and it begins with a couple of basic realities as we see it. Number one, New York State in general has a need to develop more housing units within the state. We accept those. This is Westchester decision makers. We accept that as a necessity. The growth of population, certainly in Westchester County, has been established. We grew 6%, almost 6% between 2010 to the 2020 census. COVID had some short-term negative effect, but now in the longer term, more people are moving into Westchester, and I would suspect Long Island as well. Perhaps moving out of an urban environment, but not just the urban environment of New York City, but other places as well in the tri-state area. Westchester is a very desirable place to live for lots of reasons that we all know. And that demand to live puts pressure on our existing housing stock. I talked to any realtor, and they say we can't find enough product to sell, which means that when a single-family house comes on the market, it gets gobbled up quickly, and generally in the marketplace, there's a bidding war. There's any number of people, probably in my or our age cohort, who say that their kids want to live in the county, live in the area, but they can't find something that's either available or available at an affordable level of price. Certainly, when you have high demand, those who have the greater degree of wealth can compete financially for those units, whether it's a rental unit, a condo unit, perhaps a co-op, or a single-family house. And in those situations, a person who's just starting out and they want to live in Westchester County, they're a young family, they're going to grow, they have difficulty finding and affording that which they find in this area. So this is a real problem. This is not a joke. On the other hand, I think we've come to the belief that identifying the problem and identifying the goal, which is laudable, and we agree with the 3% increase, perhaps more than that, to have more housing units. And we would qualify that the goal should clearly emphasize affordable housing units for people who aren't making Wall Street salaries or top litigator salaries. That affordability should be a critical factor of this. We have to be able to have housing units that the nurse and the teacher can afford, that the young, people who grow up in their parents' home can afford, and also a place to afford for those people that have hit their senior years. They're prepared to sell their house. They might make a lot of money off the sale of the house, but then they have to have an affordable apartment setting where they're on a fixed income. So we agree that there is an issue here. What I think we see clearly, and as suburban decision makers, not people who live in Manhattan who are accustomed with the Manhattan level of density, is that every community has, under New York State law, the right to decide how they want their community to grow. The voters of that community, through the people they elect, and the authority to create zones for which certain amounts of density or lack of density is acceptable. I do not accept the premise that zoning is intrinsically racist. I do not accept the provision that zoning is intrinsically wrong. There are people, generally those who are, in Manhattan, aren't familiar with the suburbs, they have that attitude, and that drives some of their policy, it drives some of their evaluation of policy. They have a right to their opinions, and they can quote the things they want to quote. Much of what they quote is the perception of what happens in the suburbs that dates back perhaps 30, 40, 50 years ago, when not only people by the color of their skin or their religious affiliations were being prejudiced against, but those days are different now. You look at the way that people have interacted in positions of public authority, where people are being elected across the demographic lines in Westchester County, where people rise to the top of major corporations in Westchester County across those demographic lines. And I think we're showing that we made great strides in being an open, diverse society. Certainly in Westchester County, I can defend that very strongly. The problem is, in wanting to solve the housing problem, in my judgment, you will do more damage by overriding the decision of a local community to grow in a certain way, in a certain format. People are attracted to communities for their reasons. We bring up all these municipal officials, and someone today talks about Benton, somebody else talks about Hastings. They're not two equal communities. They're very different in their construct. The level of services, what their downtown looks like, what they provide. The basic services have to be provided for everybody. But how they do it in a more rural, if you will, or less dense environment, a place like Bedford, is different from what you get in a more classic suburban community like a Hastings or a Larchmont. And some of the down-county communities don't have a lot of space to grow. Now, vertical development has been accepted and is happening in downtown New Rochelle, downtown White Plains, along the river in Yonkers, but it's not that level of growth in every part of those communities. There's a Highlands neighborhood, there's Battle Hill, and Haviland Manor in White Plains that does not develop and grow the way downtown White Plains does. Those decisions need to be made at the White Plains Common Council. Certainly not here in the county office building, and certainly not in Albany, in my opinion, and in our opinion. And it's also true that in each of the communities they're like that. What happens in downtown New Rochelle should not necessarily happen in Wilmot Woods, or in Bonnie Crest, or in Residence Park in the south end of New Rochelle, or in the east end of New Rochelle. These are decisions made by New Rochelle members of the council. They're elected, they campaign, they in theory have the support of the people who put them in office. They make those decisions. So I don't believe that zoning is intrinsically wrong, and I certainly don't believe that a community should be automatically overridden. So you have a problem, what's the right solution? Not to just override the zoning. I don't think this is a matter of partisanship. I am proud to be a member of the party that I am in. I do not believe that because somebody else in my party believes a certain thing that automatically attaches to me or to us. We develop our own thinking about that, and we debate, and we discuss those things. And in my judgment, the fastest way to get the amount of housing units online that you want is to require each community to put a plan together. Let them look at the way they intend their community to grow, where they think they can solve the problem. I'll give you one example. Someone will talk, Dan, about transit-oriented development around a train station. You've certainly seen a concentration of that in a number of places. It's happening in downtown Portchester. It's happening in Sleepy Hollow, Tarrytown. It's certainly happening in those three cities that I've just mentioned. But it may also be true that along 287, there are office buildings, commercial office buildings, that no longer have the viability to be fully occupied with commercial tenants, but there is a demand for residential units. And it might be that a community can satisfy the need for additional units, including affordability, by converting a building on the 287 corridor rather than developing more densely around the local train station in that community. That's a decision that's made by the local government, and then the state can support that decision with tax incentives, direct subsidies certainly, or tax incentives that make it possible for the owner of that corporate office building to make it a residential. And depending on the specifics of it, if the infrastructure is already there. In situations as I've just described, you have the infrastructure, you have sewer pipes, you have water pipes, you have electrical corridors, you have public transit. You may not have that around a train station in the further northern parts of the county. Now, you also have watershed areas around the county that are in close proximity to train stations. And so how do you justify the fact that there's an effort made to try to maintain the quality of drinking water when you get to the northern part of Westchester County? Some of the train stations, specifically Purdy's, Goldman's Bridge, on the upper part of the Harlem line, they're immediately adjacent to watershed areas. And so the idea of, we develop around, well, that doesn't apply in some of those areas where those situations exist. And all along the Hudson line, where we have commuter rail stations, the west of the train tracks is the Hudson River, so there's no opportunity to think in those terms. So I do think that the answer, as I see it, involves a different strategy to accomplish a goal that we agree with the executive branch on. But we do it respecting local governments, we do it in cooperation with local governments, and we'll see how it turns out. We are not state decision makers. Whatever does happen, we believe that Westchester has an interest in trying to help solve the housing problem, and that we will be good partners in it. We ourselves have already tried to do it. We don't have all the resources we could have. We have not, achieved everything we hope to achieve. And perhaps during my tenure in this job, I won't be able to achieve all the things I'd like to achieve. It'll pass on to the next person to try to take it from there. But fundamentally, what I do think is that it's going to take a strategy, not of mandating, but a strategy of cooperating. That will be the successful way it works in Westchester. Now,